Dr. Brian Weiss published his book Messages from the Masters 12 years after his groundbreaking first book, Many Lives, Many Masters. This is his fourth book. His first books gave substantial details on the case studies of his past life regression therapies to help heal body, mind, and soul, and on relationships, soulmates, and love. This book is a little different, as it has less past life stories and more of the big picture of the overall themes that keep coming through. When reading past life regression, it is possible to get lost in the trees. It can be fascinating to learn narratives from past lives, wow, or to question the scientific validity yourself, or to defend yourself from the questioning of others. But with this book, Weiss is over that now, and he tries to focus more on the message rather than the messenger. So this book seeks to get big answers to, so what is past life regression all about? Weiss also discusses other ways to access spiritual awakening that he first found through past life regression and that are implicit in the messages from the Masters. He says, quote, "This book, which reflects what I teach my patients and audiences today, is about much more than reincarnation and regression therapy. These are important parts of the puzzle, but there are also other important pieces, and one must know them all and know them well. I have studied healers, mediums, psychics, and others involved in holistic and alternative practices, and I have learned that there are other avenues to one's spiritual awakening." End quote. So Messages from the Masters continues this theme from Many Lives, Many Masters, where half of past life regression is about the past lives themselves, and half is about the message and the spiritual awakening. So I say there aren't many case studies. In fact, the only real case study in detail comes at the start of the book. So for the rest of the book, he uses very short vignettes to illustrate longer general points. But at the start, we do get a single session that he does with a TV journalist that does illustrate much of his process. So he includes descriptions of a full hypnotic induction and regressions to 2 times earlier in this life, reminding us that hypnotherapy is implicit in past life regression. So we see the TV journalist being a young girl in this life with her father on a happy walk in winter. That's it, that's the scene. The next scene earlier in this life is recalling details of her birth experience. And it is common for past life therapists to do that kind of this life regression, and it leads into her accessing a past life, which is as a settler in the Midwest, where she was a young girl in that past life. And it just happens that her this life parents and brother were her past life parents and brother. And the major event in that life is that they find there's an early death of her brother by gunshot and the effect that it has on her mother. So we go on to find that the client lived her own life as an independent woman who then dies at a ripe old age, satisfied. Now, to be honest, this case study isn't particularly notable in itself, but the way Weiss presents it is more as a demonstration of how the whole process works, not necessarily in the therapy that it involves. So Weiss himself explains that it's significant for its implicit messages more than the narrative itself because, as he says, quote, "Andrea's regression experience reflects the major themes of this book. She recalled memories and feelings from the fetal state before she was actually born. She was also aware of her parents' emotions, demonstrating that consciousness is non-local, not limited to our physical bodies or brains. This also implies that when we die, our consciousness survives and goes on, since it is not physically based," unquote. Weiss will go on to give examples from people and other doctors of out-of-body experiences, where people are unconscious on operating tables, but say they can hear and observe discussions about them during surgery or even in an office elsewhere in the hospital. Weiss says, and I quote, "Andrea learned how past life events can profoundly influence current life connections. Andrea found her current life parents and brother in her past life memory. She learned that we are always reunited with our loved ones. After she died in her lifetime on the Great Plains, Andrea found a cone of beautiful blue light. A loved relative or friend or a spiritual being is often waiting at the light to greet our out-of-body traveler and to impart important information or messages from the other side, as well as from other forms of psychic or paranormal phenomena, will be examined, as we all possess intuitive abilities. End quote. Weiss will go on to give examples of how this occurs outside of regressions, including a story from his own wife Carol that she had kept secret from him for fear of criticism, as he was then still a dismissive scientist. After Weiss's spiritual awakening with past life regression, Carol then told Brian that after the death of her father years before, she had received an actual phone call from her father, greatly reassuring her and helping their relationship. She was still concerned of telling her husband Brian Weiss this would be unacceptable, but as she told him, she was relieved to see that Brian reached back from his new library and pulled out a book of research called Phone Calls from the Dead. Weiss goes on to wrap up the initial case study and its greater meanings by saying, quote, "Ultimately, Andrea's profound regression experience will lead her to a greater understanding of the nature of life and soul. Such an understanding is a sacred step. Such steps are accompanied by positive changes in the present life, better physical and emotional health, healthier relationships, more happiness and joy." End quote. Happiness and joy becomes a key theme, which is a bit of a contrast from his other books like Through Time into Healing, which were more about healing some problems. This book has more elements of positive psychology. So Weiss gives multiple examples of regression clients who find ways of healing without regressing to root cause events in the past, yet still using regression. So he says, quote, "As I hypnotized John, then asked him to visualize and walk through a special door, expecting him to recover a past life memory, but he did not. His experience was instead a spiritual one. John found himself in a beautiful garden. He described a wondrous, diffuse light that filled that garden, a light that infused him with a sense of profound peace." End quote. Weiss goes on to describe that John became aware of children playing. He saw a white horse. The word purity flashed into his mind. Words could not adequately describe the scene, but what he could know was that he was learning the benefit of play. In hypnosis, John says, quote, "This joy, beauty, awareness, this garden on earth could be here all the time whenever we choose. It can be here now in the present if we choose. If we remembered how," as he said this, tears of joy quietly rolled down his cheeks. "We can become conscious of the other reality now, even in our present state, even in physical form. We can feel the pure joy, the ecstasy, the peace, and the beauty even now. And when we pass beyond the physical state, we become aware of the same. We go to the same. We really are the same. Our forgetfulness, our state of being unconscious, is reversible. We do not need to die or have an NDE to remember, to re-experience. We are spiritual beings, and our true home is a spiritual one, a timeless place that many call heaven." End quote. So let's look at spiritual values that are brought up in this book. Now, heaven might sound like a Christian concept or a linguistic choice for a spiritual experience, in an attempt to describe it anyway. So to avoid choosing one religion's take on spiritual experience, Weiss has a lengthy Appendix A called Shared Spiritual Values, where he gathers, quote, "passages from the sacred writings of some of the world's great religions. These quotes demonstrate that there really is only one religion when you transcend the surface rituals and reach the spiritual treasures lying beyond." End quote. These passages include quotes that affirm things like the law of karma, as most religions include references with phrases like, "you reap what you sow." Now, many other books have done this, including books I found influential like The Perennial Philosophy by Aldous Huxley and Oneness, Great Principles Shared by All Religions by Jeffrey Moses. So all these books are also useful to read to go deeper into this, seeing the commonality behind religion and removing the sense of difference. Now, meditation. pops up in this book as well as a key commonality of spiritual practice worldwide is the practice of some form of meditation. And indeed, Weiss recognizes this with his second appendix in the book, which is longer meditation exercises. So this is different to the scripts that he's used in previous books, which were hypnotic regression exercises. So instead he uses meditations, and he says, quote, "The two meditations in this section will help you to feel more peace in your life by removing the blocks and obstacles to your inner joy and happiness. You can work with a partner, one reading the script to the other who is relaxing with closed eyes. Or you can record the script into a tape recorder, later playing it back to yourself as you become the listener," end quote. So his first meditation that he gives is called Through the Door into Past Lives, but this time the directions are left open as he says, quote, "Imagine a beautiful door in front of you. This is a door in time and space, a door to your past lives or a spiritual state," end quote. So Weiss prefaces this exercise with a whole section called Reaching Beyond Ourselves, where he advocates for meditation and visualization by saying, quote, "Our hearts know the path to happiness and inner peace. Spiritual practices such as meditation and prayer remind us of what we already know. When we forget our heart's message and fall into life's ruts and crevices, we feel unfulfilled and unhappy. We get depressed and anxious. We have blurred our perspective, forgotten the bigger picture, and lost our way. The remedy is simple. Take the time to remember your divinity, your spiritual nature. Remember why you are here. Meditation is one way of triggering your memory. To meditate regularly is to remember regularly. You are reminded of the bigger picture and what is important to us in our lives and what is not," end quote. Weiss here next refers to his own meditation, as there are large parts of the book that come not from past life regression case studies as we're used to, but come from his meditations and in fact become, in a way, fairly didactic pronouncements about life. Now, didactic does have a slightly negative connotation, but it does mean teacher, and if you're a spiritual teacher, you're probably prone to making those kind of statements. So Weiss does this, but he's aware that he's doing it, so he has this disclaimer when he says, quote, "Many of the thoughts and ideas came to me one day while I was meditating in the foothills above the city of Medellin in Colombia. I value them highly because they arrived in my consciousness during meditation, and I could sense the presence or at least the influence of the masters around me, and thus I have barely edited this advice. I realize some may seem didactic and difficult. They were received, however, amid a tremendous energy of caring and compassion," end quote. So this is a good observation and awareness that he can have for himself. So for me, part of the key learning isn't just the statements he's made. Because yes, on paper it can seem a bit didactic and therefore a little bit hard to swallow. But I think the main message here isn't, do we take Brian Weiss's channeled wisdom on life in general? I'd say the bigger message is, do your own meditation. Feel the tremendous energy of caring and passion in yourself and have your own insights as well. And you may find that you get something stated in your own words with real feeling that is in alignment with what Brian Weiss says and therefore is easier to swallow. This is because other people's thoughts on paper can appear didactic, but those same thoughts that arrive to you in your meditation while you're on your own journey can hit different and go from didactic to revelatory, personally affecting and life-changing. Now, even though Weiss has said specifically in the past that you don't have to go to Tibet and sit in a cave to gain inner peace, he still does discuss his own many travels as part of his process in this book. Now, as it happens, I have traveled to northern India and parts that used to be Tibet and been in those caves and spent years living in India myself. So personally, I advocate go to the Himalayas and meditate. You don't have to, but if you can, do it. And you know what? I meditate and travel extensively. I advocate for meditation and travel, In fact, I was very recently in Medellin, Colombia myself, and found it a delightful and helpful place to be. So Brian Weiss goes on to open up about some of his own issues, and he says, quote, I was working hard at the office treating patients with lectures and conferences with a mountain of correspondence. What about vacations? What about reading for pleasure? Should I take more time for myself and my family and my friends? Should I enjoy the simple pleasures of life more? Or is the work too important? The message was emphatic in tone that I received. It said, this world is given to you as a beautiful garden. You diminish the garden if you do not enjoy its fruits. End quote. I could not agree more. That's my reason for traveling in a lot of ways. It's a wonderful world, and I love to go to so many of the beautiful places in it. Hence, I advocate not just for meditation, but for travel. And in fact, they go hand in hand because there is an element of pilgrimage, yatra, we call it in India, where you remove yourself from your conventional circumstances, and that enables you to see the world in a different way as you look through the eyes of the people who do things differently, and it creates a sense of removal from the day-to-day routine that enables you to drop many things and to drop into meditative states. And particularly if you go to a meditation retreat that are offered in places like Medellin and the Himalayas in India, where I particularly favor. So this question arrives. If this is so indicated, what stops us from enjoying the world more? We can have our own addictions to work, as Weiss says that he does, and we can have our own fears of doing things. People are often fearful of traveling to South America. So we can consider the statement from the masters that Weiss makes, and I quote, we are here in physical state in order to learn and to grow. We learn qualities such as love, faith, hope, and awareness. We must unlearn negative qualities, including fear, greed, pride, and prejudice. End quote. I personally do advocate very much for the benefits of travel, overcoming any prejudice towards certain areas. It's a very practical way of being a humble pilgrim in an unfamiliar land where we must adapt and we must go beyond any fear or prejudice to even embark on that journey. Weiss continues to live this and to show its benefits in multiple stories in this book, as he mentions again going to Brazil. Now, in some of those times, he's selling out conferences as a keynote speaker, but in others, he attends an event held by a famous psychic who doesn't know who he is. Yet this psychic gives Brian Weiss profound messages. Now, it happens as I write this review, I'm in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil for a few months, a place that I keep getting drawn back to due to its powerful and delightful energies. So, psychics are something that do continue to come up in this book, and Weiss references psychics and psychic ability within us as a resource that we can all get our own messages from the masters, whether we're in a foreign special place or not. So he tells one story of a particularly gifted psychic, and he says, quote, in my travels through Brazil, a spiritually progressed country, I have met many talented and enlightened people. I was very impressed by a medium named Celia. She spoke only Portuguese, but through an interpreter, she suddenly, and without any real change in her voice or tone, started giving me messages. She said, your son Adam is here. His death was important to bring you peace and serenity later through your work. End quote. Weiss notes, she then told him things that she couldn't possibly know through any other means. And this took him back to the events that triggered him writing his first book. He says, quote, I remembered Catherine's messages 17 years earlier, moving and life-changing messages from my father and my son Adam. A chill came over me. Her accuracy gave me goosebumps. After all these years, I still don't take miracles for granted. This psychic then said to me, your spiritual work is exactly right. It is correct and good. Don't get discouraged. Continue. End quote. Now, this becomes profound as Weiss continues to open up about the struggles that he's faced recently in his work. And he says, quote, Celia did not know that I do get discouraged from time to time because the demands of the work keep me from my family and friends, because I cannot possibly respond to the many requests for help, and because of the relentless onslaught from critics and skeptics. Celia's words revived my heart and refreshed my soul. End quote. So this is interesting, isn't it? We often think Brian Weiss has a perfect life where he's accepted and loved and appreciated for all the work that he's doing, but we see that we can see that it is important to look after yourself as a healer, to allow yourself to travel to whatever it is that brings you joy, so that you have the kind of experiences and opportunities that this life affords. So while Weiss is talking about psychics, he's talking about spiritual messages that really don't have much to do with past life regression. Weiss continues now in the next section to talk about professional psychics who do past life readings that can range from a single sentence told in seconds to a simple story told in minutes. Like many past life therapists, I myself get many clients who come to me for past life sessions because a professional psychic has given one of my clients a piece of information and now they want to get the whole story. Well, they've been given this information and they doubt its veracity and they want to find out for themselves. They want to feel it for themselves in regression. Now, Weiss doesn't mention psychics who describes past lives in this book, but he does in another book, Many Lives, Many Masters, when his client goes to a well-known psychic called Iris, who's able to repeat most of what Catherine had discovered herself under hypnosis. Now, I must say, to be so accurate and extensive would put her in the top 10% of psychics easily. And Weiss says himself, quote, the two of them obtained the same information by different means. What Catherine had arrived at through hypnotic regression, Iris had received through psychic channels. End quote. Now, the other aspect of psychic work related to past life regression is too that people who have had past life regressions themselves and who give them tend to grow in their own psychic abilities. And this can range from becoming more intuitive to being able to access images from past lives and access spiritual messages more easily and more often. As Brian Weiss says in his first book, quote, between sessions, Catherine herself is becoming increasingly more psychic. She had intuitions about people and events that proved to be true, end quote. So now note that she says increasingly psychic between sessions. Yet in the sessions themselves, once guided into hypnosis, people become very psychic, and that they can be guided through very detailed and extensive questioning into their own past lives and between lives memories and get a lot of narrative detail, a complete picture of the beginning, middle, and end when prompted to do so, and they can relay profound spiritual messages far beyond what's in their capacity to do in a conscious state. So for me, this is the key difference. You can go to a psychic and they can tell you a limited short version of a past life. Or you can go to a past life therapist, get the full story, and become more psychic yourself, not just in the session, but between the sessions, and tell yourself an extensive and long version of many past lives and between lives, and continue to grow in your psychic abilities between sessions and after sessions. Now, meditation continues to reoccur in this book, and we'll come back to it, because there are a couple of approaches you can take in meditation and a couple of distinctions to make, especially in how meditation relates to past life regression. So approach one. Now, my own personal experience in meditation was encountering it during my 20s while traveling in India. At that stage, I had not done hypnosis, past life regression, or any real healing or spiritual practices. I myself started with 10-day meditation retreats where we'd sit for 8 to 10 hours per day. Some of those 10-day retreats involved some discussion groups and Buddhist teachings. Some were in total silence with nothing but meditation, 10 hours a day for 10 days. So what I personally found was that as the day goes by, you would stop processing the day-to-day things and you would start opening up to expansive visions and experiences, awakening experiences, including past lives. So that is what happened to me and a big part of how I got on this path. And I realize it's a lot to recommend going on a 10-day full meditation retreat, but I'm telling you, that's what I did. And it's an experience that many others have done, and it's transformative. It becomes probably the key 10 days in your life, and it can alter and stay with you and affect the rest of your life. It's particularly useful if you don't have a lot of prior experience, as you can catch up on years worth of dabbling in these 10 days. You're removed from your environment. Food is given. You have no phone, no conversation, no environmental triggers. After about a week, your brain gets to a place it's never been in your entire life. And it's particularly powerful because of the compounding interest of 1 hour after another, 1 day after another. It can take you to a place where less intensive meditation may never get you in this life. This gives you a chance to have spontaneous experiences far beyond the ordinary, including recalling past lives spontaneously. The second approach is the more commonly recommended way of just try it and do it for 5-10 minutes a day in your busy schedule. For many, I think of this as a preparation or planting seeds. It's a start, and hopefully people get inspired and comfortable enough to then go on a weekend retreat and then a 10-day meditation retreat, or perhaps they're just planting seeds for a future life. But for some, especially those who have already been on a substantial hypnotic or healing path or other spiritual practices, they may be able to access past life recall or hear their higher self or spirit guide speaking to them without having to spend all the time of a 10-day retreat. And I know from my own self and my own students, and especially my clients, that once they've spent a few hours in hypnosis doing past life and between lives regression guided by me, that afterwards they find they can do hypnosis, audios, or meditations at a much higher level, and are much more easily able to access past lives and messages from the masters. So that is a side effect benefit of doing deep practice, whether it's guided by somebody or being in meditation yourself, as it greatly enhances your psychic ability in general and your abilities and results in your hypnotic or meditative practice. Now, as the book goes on, he has some interesting stories about celebrities that he's encountered, including the musician Gloria Estefan, the actor Sylvester Stallone, and even Princess Diana. And if you find that intriguing, then you can go read his book, as we've spoken quite enough in this review. So I'll wrap it up now, because in the end, this book is less about impressive externals or extraordinary inner experiences and more about opening up to the world and to the universe. So I'll leave you with a final quote, as Weiss says, quote, "The messages from the masters come from everywhere. Some of the messages come from my own meditations, and some of the information comes through feelings at a level of understanding that is very difficult to translate into words. For some concepts, there are no words. Remember to listen to your intuitions and try not to let your fears sway the soft and gentle murmurings of your beautiful heart. Feel the freedom to love without holding back, without reserve, without condition. For our lives on this plane are limited ones. We are merely in a school. When we return home, we take only our thoughts, our actions, and our love with us. Finally, do not be afraid. We are immortal, eternal spirits, and we are always love." End quote. To get my book, Past Life Awakening, 7 Regression Case Studies Illustrate 7 Spiritual Laws, which you can get as a paperback, ebook, or Kindle, check the links in the description. To have hypnotherapy or past life regression sessions with me, click the link below. To get training with me that includes video courses, technical manuals, session swaps with fellow students, and can include personal mentoring with me, click the links to learn hypnotherapy with my Hypnotherapy Specialist Institute, or past life regression, spirit release between lives with my Past Life Awakening Institute.